Hitsuki was a handsome but pathetic bum who thought his miserable life was over after his childhood friends said their unholy activities had gotten her pregnant. However, things take a drastic turn when they both get Isekai'd to a world where he is forced to clap 12 freaky princesses to save everyone from extinction.
Be gentle, okay?
It all starts with Itsuki running up the stairs to get to the rooftop at school, where Maharu is waiting to tell him something important. He notices that she is a bit hesitant and reminds her that they have been friends with benefits for years, so she takes a moment to gather her words before saying that she is pregnant. He gets surprised, so she reminds him of all the sinful activities they have indulged in before telling him to relax because he always had a sausage cover on. He then asks if she is okay, and she claims to have accepted the reality, but just as she tries to explain the pregnancy, they both get sucked into a portal and wake up in a dungeon moments later. As they both get on their feet, Itsuki notices how calm she is and asks about it, so she tells him that her pregnancy makes it hard to react to spontaneous stuff because she still doesn't understand it. He gets confused again, so she further explains that she is basically a 21st century Virgin Mary because the pregnancy wasn't conceived through the usual method. She had apparently noticed something funny in her body about a week ago and searched Google before taking multiple tests and learning that she was going to be a single mom without even tasting a BBC for once. After he promises to help her figure out the truth, she starts screaming and falls to her knees. As it immediately attacks Itsuki, he continues dodging its attack, but realizes that he is only seconds away from getting torn open. Thankfully, an insignia suddenly appears on his arm and creates a sword, so he uses it to keep blocking and finally slices right through the demon. Just then, they see a crack in the wall and make it out before finding themselves in a forest. After Itsuki shows Maharu the insignia on her face, a fox suddenly tries to climb her, so she slams it into a nearby tree. It then introduces itself as Mana and welcomes them to the magical land of Gravenia before a man named Narcissist shows up to explain that they are in another dimension where magic exists. After a quick tour of Gravenia, he takes them to the castle to see King Shangri-La, who also welcomes them and goes straight to the point about the danger their world faces. When he says they have to save Gravenia, Itsuki gets confused and asks why they can't do it themselves, so Shangri-La explains how visitors from the other side, like them, get transported to Gravenia with insignias that represent their god-level abilities. As he further explains that such power means they are solely responsible for the fate of Gravenia, Maharu reminds him that they are still just students with absolutely no combat experience. Just then, she collapses into Itsuki, so Shangri-La orders for a doctor to be summoned and tells Mana to take Itsuki to his room. On the way out, Itsuki continues demanding to know where they took Maharu, so Mana tells him to chill out because she is only exhausted and is probably just sleeping in the doctor's office. Hours later, Itsuki wakes up strapped to a bed and sees a hottie named Leon staring right at his Maximus Prime. She then promises not to take it for a spin and introduces herself as the doctor. She compliments his hot bod and says he might actually be the savior they have all been expecting before showing him the 12 insignias scattered across his body, all resembling the constellations. He gets confused again, so she says he has to defeat all the monsters in the kingdom's labyrinth to reactivate the portal that brought him and Maharu from their world. When he reminds her that he is still just an average guy, she tells him not to worry because he now has 12 maidens, each with a constellation insignia, that will help him defeat the impurities with the power of love. Just then, Maharu walks in and says she is actually one of his maidens before Leon asks if she felt anything leave her body when they first got transported. After she explains how she threw up a blood-hungry monster in the dungeon, Leon says it is similar to the impurities they will have to face and tells her not to worry because all the other maidens also expelled impurities after getting their insignias. Just then, Mana tells Itsuki that he has to get started with Maharu by practicing the love ritual because only the child born as a result of that ritual will be strong enough to stop the impurities. While Itsuki begins to like the idea of him having to clap 12 hotties to save the world, Maharu asks if it is really necessary, so Mana and Leon tell her not to worry because it only hurts the first time. Several minutes later, they end up in bed together and start talking about how weird their current situation is to make it a little less awkward. Upon seeing how disturbed she is about everything, Itsuki tells her not to bother if it's too uncomfortable, but she claims to not mind losing her V card to him.
Yes! Hell yeah!
And says she is more concerned by the fact that they are being watched. Just then, Mana explains that the process of making star offspring is actually painless and tries to strip Mahiru so they can get it over with. But Itsuki grabs her and says they have to consider her feelings first. He then tells Mahiru that they simply have to go through with it because it's the only way to go back home. As he tries to open her shirt up, she takes the initiative to also help him take off the cuffs before getting into position to pop each other's cherries. Barely a few seconds later, Mana and Leon tell them to stop because the Star Child has already been created. Itsuki asks how it's possible, so Leon explains that the first ritual is one where they only have to come in contact with each other's bodies. After their star son, named Virgo, introduces himself and promises to help Itsuki to the best of his abilities, Itsuki thanks Mahiru for trusting him enough to go through with it. The following day, they both meet up by a field to talk about the ritual, but Mana shows up and continues asking Itsuki how Mahiru's milkers felt until he throws her into the grass. They then ask for Virgo, and she explains how they shipped him off to a foster home so he can begin his training. Upon hearing that, Itsuki and Mahiru remember that they have a world to save and ask what comes next for them. Moments later, Mana leads them into town, but a chick named Ruka suddenly bumps into Itsuki and blames him for not looking before grabbing her bread and running off. Afterwards, they finally get to a class where Leon has been waiting to introduce Itsuki to the rest of his maidens. She further explains that the class was specifically set up to help them all train and fulfill their duties together, and he decides to take the lead by properly introducing himself as their baby daddy. As the girls all take turns introducing themselves, he sees that Ruka is also one of them before Mana asks if he has enough RIZZ to make all of them fold. He admits to not having enough experience with so many hotties, so Mana slips him a special edition RIZZ guide to help him become a Gen Z version of Johnny Sins. After taking lessons on some basic techniques, Itsuki leaves to learn more about Gravenia, while Mana meets up with Ruka to discuss why he made her run into Itsuki earlier on. A couple of days later, he asks Itsuki if the RIZZ guide has helped him make any new offspring with the girls, but he still hasn't tried anything since Mahiru. Although a bit disappointed in him, Mana says it won't be a problem because they already canceled classes so he can spend time with the girls under a cherry blossom tree. Moments later, they all get seated at a nice spot under one of the cherry blossoms and exchange snacks while getting to know each other a little better. As they all eat and chat, Itsuki notices that Ruka isn't there, so he heads out and finds her plucking flowers. After she says it's for the orphanage where she works, he decides to help out, but then a butterfly lands on his head, so she chases it off and ends up inches away from a kiss. When he asks why she isn't moving back, she tries to call him a creep for thinking she wanted something else, and claims she can read all his cultured thoughts. He tells her to stop the cap, so she offers to read his mind, and says she won't do the ritual with him if she picks up anything creepy in his head. Upon getting close for the reading, she pulls back and asks if he is actually brain dead before remembering that he is not from Gravenia, which makes it impossible for her to read his mind. She still claims to hate the idea of wanting to do the ritual with him, so he promises to never make her or the other girls feel uncomfortable. After she thanks him for all the help and leaves, Mahiru catches up to him with a drunken look on her face, so he asks how she got booze, and she tells him that some of the chocolates they have been eating are filled with it. She then thanks him for saving her from a bully many years ago, before asking if he remembers a promise he made to her around the same time. He gets confused and says he can't remember it, so she tells him not to worry and reminds him to get along with the other girls so they can get through the mission as soon as possible and head back home. The following day, Mana expresses her disappointment with Itsuki again before they get to an armor shop, where she randomly decides to jerk his stick until he almost blows. She then explains how dangerous the labyrinths can be before taking him to the foster home to watch as a chick named Alfie almost clobbers Virgo to death. When she sees Itsuki's face, her entire personality changes, but while she tries to play nice, he obsesses over her milk factory until Mana tells him to stop it. After Virgo excitedly hugs him and promises to keep getting stronger, Alfie asks when he plans to make more offspring because Virgo won't be enough to help him fight off the impurities in the labyrinth. On the way back, Mana keeps asking if he has at least gotten close to any of the girls, but then they run into Ruka outside the orphanage where she works. At the love ritual room minutes later, he explains the situation and says it will be unfair if Virgo ends up being the only one going into the labyrinth with him. That strikes a chord in Ruka's heart, so she decides to accept that he might not be the average kitty-addicted creep. She also agrees to perform the ritual with him, but she asks if he already knows what to do because it's her first time, so he decides to help out by stripping everything away in a matter of seconds. After a long night of teaching her how to spread it, he goes to the throne room with Narcissus to see Shangri-La, who then tells him about the 12-star wards before transferring them to him. They both then explain that he will need them to finish off the impurities in the Labyrinth before sending him to the entrance for his first mission. With help from Leon and Mana, the girls perform the prayer to unlock the Labyrinth before he goes in with Virgo, Cancer, and Mana to fight their first official impurity lord. After Mana shows Virgo and Cancer what to do, the impurity reveals itself, so they both charge in to attack it and get swatted away like mosquitoes. Itsuki immediately draws his sword, but the impurity easily slaps it away as well before using laser eyes to smote Virgo and Cancer. Upon seeing this, Itsuki tries to attack it with his bare hands, but Mana talks him out of getting himself murked on the first day, so he runs out with Virgo and Cancer before making up his mind to make more offspring no matter the cost. After Virgo and Cancer revert to their original forms, Mana explains that they are always automatically protected by holy dolls, but tells Itsuki to work on improving his skills or they will never be strong enough to face the impurity lord of the first level. Days later, Itsuki decides to try again, and Mana begins to feel confident as they walk in, but as she cooks up a scheme to turn Itsuki into a love ritual machine, they all crawl out and beg for help before passing out. Minutes later, Mana takes him to see Narcissus and starts freaking out because a regular hero would have already wiped out an entire level. After getting her to relax, Narcissus tells Itsuki that the only way to make him stronger is to perform a double love ritual. Before he can even ask what it is, Mana starts explaining how he has to get his magnum fully prepared because clapping two baddies at the same time is not going to be as easy as what he did with Mahiru. When Itsuki tells her that a three-way is definitely something he can handle, she further explains that he has to make sure they both reach the climax zone before he spills his milk. As he starts to second-guess it, Narcissus points out the fact that offspring made from the double love ritual are rumored to be even stronger than the regular ones. Itsuki then asks why he is not absolutely sure, so he says how they have never had a case where a hero was weaker than fully conscious Zenitsu before. After he asks for some time to think about it, Itsuki meets up with Mahiru to check out a hot spring Mana suggested to him. He then tries to tell her about the three-way ritual but stops himself to protect her from having an emotional breakdown. The next moment, she trips and drops her bag, so he goes to pick it up and gets curious about the Itsuki doll she has strapped to it. She immediately grabs it and tells him not to think that it means anything special before they finally find the hot spring. While he gets bothered by the fact that they will have to share it, she quickly starts stripping and reminds him that they have shared baths together in the past. He tries to tell her that it was many years ago, but upon seeing that she is one piece of clothing away from showing every inch of her hot bod, he shuts up to watch. Unfortunately, she came prepared and enters the bath with a suit to keep her good stuff covered before he also strips and joins her inside. Upon taking a close look at him, she sees all the recent scars and asks where they came from, so he explains how hectic training has been and says he will definitely get a couple more scars before being strong enough to take down an impurity lord. The next moment, she pulls up the Itsuki doll to hide her concerned expression and makes him promise to stay alive so they can go back home together after he completes the mission. After making a promise, he tells her not to let their current situation stress her out, but as she lists out everything they have experienced within the last few days, her head gets overheated, causing her to pass out into the water. Hours later, she wakes up and apologizes for ruining their evening together before realizing that her doll is missing. She immediately heads back into the water, but Itsuki lifts her off the ground and says the water usually gets extremely cold after dark. When she says he is the one putting himself at risk of getting sick despite already having a lot on his plate. He acts like it's no big deal, so she waits on the grass while he freezes his legs off searching for the doll. After eventually finding it, he reminds her of their promise to stay together forever, and she gets surprised that he actually remembered, so they both decide to seal the promise with a kiss. Just then, Mana shows up to interrupt and tells them to save all the sloppy PDA for the special love carriage she brought along with her. As she lists out all the toys she added to make sure Mahiru reaches the point of no return, she gets uncomfortable and asks Itsuki to stop Mana, but he instead starts arguing over which pickle-shaped massager will work best on Mahiru's untouched snail. Minutes later, Mana takes him to see Leon, and he suddenly develops symptoms of a cold, so Leon asks what happened, but Mana takes over to explain how he is too spineless to pull off the double love ritual because he couldn't even get it up for Mahiru. After saying that he is in no condition for the ritual, Leon puts Mana to sleep and tells Itsuki that he has to practice the ritual with her and any other girl he wants so she can be sure he will be strong enough for the real deal. Just then, his stomach starts to grumble, so she offers him some apples and asks if he would like it juiced in between her chest pillows. When he asks if she can bake it instead, she gets shocked for a moment and says that he sounded a lot like her brother, who passed away 5 years ago. After he offers his condolences, she tells him to get another one of the girls for their three-way test as soon as possible. While walking through town minutes later, he tries to figure out which of the girls he should reach out to before hearing a lot of noise from a bar. Once inside, he sees them all going nuts for one of his maidens named Fallon and watches as she decides to tame the wild beasts with a quick but sweet dance. He then compliments her and asks for a moment of her time, so they sit by the counter, and he explains how important it is for him to clap her as soon as possible. Her nonchalant response to the request gets him curious, so she reminds him that they were all pulled from their regular lives to hang around until whenever he wants to save the world by smashing. Upon realizing that he has been an insensitive wuss, he apologizes for not acting sooner and demonstrates his determination by giving her a taste of his tongue game. Thanks to Mana's ultimate guide to clapping baddies, Fallen agrees to it and joins Leon in the ritual room minutes later. Just then, Itsuki sees their goddess-level plot, and his magnum drops dead as he becomes terrified. So Mana takes a moment to talk some sense into him until he regains his confidence. After several minutes of manhandling their plots, Capri and Scorpy join the ranks as his new offspring, and Narcissus gets shocked because he never expected it to go so well. Mana then goes to check on the girls and gets horrified upon seeing that Itsuki managed to make them reach the ultimate climax point in just a few minutes. The next day, Itsuki and his warrior offspring successfully take out every impurity on the first level and track down the impurity lord for the final fight. After defeating it, he offers up the first star ward to an altar to reduce the impurities across the labyrinth. But once they get back outside, a loud roar from deep inside the labyrinth suddenly rocks the entire area. At the start of the following day, Mana cooks up a bunch of stories where Itsuki plays with different versions of her cakes until he realizes that she wants to clap and takes off running. When he enters the church, a smoking hot nun named Ailey welcomes him, and he recognizes her as one of the girls he has to smash for more star offspring. Just as he tries to work his magic on her, she gets surrounded by the young students, so Itsuki asks if she is a single mom, but she says she only likes to help them with their work. She then asks them to wait so she can attend to him, but he tells her not to worry and promises to come see her again. Later that day, Maharu starts losing her patience at the lunch line, and just as he finally grabs some snacks, he spots Yuzua and chases after her to get acquainted. She then hides behind a tree and wonders why she was even chosen as one of his wives until he gets tired of looking and leaves. When he finds a bench to have his lunch in peace, Mana crashes in to continue schooling him on becoming the ultimate RIZZ master, but as her lessons progress to another depraved meltdown, Itsuki excuses himself to avoid catching the virus melting the good parts of her brain. Several minutes later, he finds Yuzuha's place and offers her the last remaining bread pack before apologizing for scaring her off. She then lets him in and shows him how she uses it as an eraser because it makes her work look better. After properly introducing herself, she apologizes for being too scared when she first saw him and serves him a cup of tea. Meanwhile, Mana dives deeper into the delusions of her corn novel and wishes she had a fox boyfriend to test it out with. At the time, Itsuki has just finished his tea, but Yuzua continues to apologize for every little thing she does until he asks about her paintings. She then explains that it is actually her job to paint and says she doesn't really like always having to be in the academy with everyone else, which is why she mostly keeps a low profile in the studio. He quickly realizes that she is a chronic introvert and asks if she also goes home all alone, but then she points out the coffin and says she actually spends her nights sleeping inside it. Naturally, he gets confused, so she further explains that it is the best way for her to experience the kind of dreams she gets paid to draw. After telling him that she basically travels to different places through her dreams and never really feels the need to go outside, she admits that things have been really bad lately because she hasn't been having the usual dreams for a while. He then tells her to take a walk outside to refresh her mind, but she refuses, so he promises to bring her more food packs and suggests having their next lunch in a park so she won't have to deal with everyone at the academy. At the park the following day, Mana catches up to ask why he hasn't gone to see Ailey yet and accuses him of being a two-timing player, but he shoves her away and tells her not to do anything stupid to make Yuzua uncomfortable. Moments later, she shows up with the coffin strapped to her back, and he starts to realize why she doesn't have any friends. When he finally asks why she went as far as redesigning the entire thing, she thanks him for noticing and says she spent all night making it look girly. She then expresses how happy she is to be freely talking to him and says she rarely feels that way, while Mena, who is currently terrifying a bird couple, watches in confusion as she struggles to understand how he has already bagged the most antisocial baddie in his harem. After showing Itsuki the painting supplies she brought along with her, Yuzua tells him that she still couldn't dream last night, but then he tells her to stop waiting for a dream before showing her how beautiful the sky looks. Just as he spots Mena's pathetic bird disguise, Yuzua grabs the coffin to take a short walk with him, but then a girl also sees Mena, so her mom immediately covers her eyes and leads her away as fast as possible. Yuzua then tells Itsuki not to worry about her anymore, and he tries to explain that they were not talking about her, but she runs back home and shuts herself inside the coffin to cry. After blaming Mena for messing things up again, Itsuki heads to the church to ask God for guidance, but then Ali shows up to talk with him. She then explains that Yuzua actually has a sleeping illness that drains her life force anytime she sleeps, and says she will most likely end up passing in her sleep soon enough because people with her condition don't last long. After telling him that is the reason why she always carries the coffin around with her, she asks him to find a way to make her feel better because there is still no way to cure her illness or slow down its effects. Moments later, he runs into Mena and apologizes for lashing out before seeing the coffin she has been working on and thanking her for using her brain to think for once. He then goes over to Yuzua's place and threatens to break the door down, so she opens up and he shows her the coffin before convincing her to spend the day experiencing the outside world with him. Hours later, they get seated by the coffins and spend a few minutes talking about how good it felt to let loose before Yuzua thanks him for taking the time to be with her and falls asleep on him. The following day, she tells him that her dreams are back and thanks him again before saying that she is ready to be his latest baby mama. Itsuki wastes no time taking her up to the ritual room and gives her a taste of the forbidden fruit before they create another star offspring. Later on, Mena congratulates him on fulfilling his duties and gives him a thank you gift for Ailey since she is the one that motivated him to help Yuzua. Upon getting to the church, he sees her leaving a mysterious room, and she gets shocked but plays it cool to avoid looking suspicious. After handing over the present, he realizes that he didn't even check to be sure it was good, but Ailey falls in love with it and thanks him for getting exactly what she wanted before pulling out a whip and treating him like a love slave. What? Days later, Itsuki takes down another impurity lord with help from his star offspring, but after he offers up the star ward to the altar, they hear the same roar from before, so he asks Mena if she has figured out the source. When she tells him that their best bet is for him to make more star offspring, he apologizes for not having enough time to be with the girls, but she tells him not to worry because she already cooked up the perfect solution to fix that problem. The very next day, he and the girls get on a bus to enjoy the day at a beach, and he thanks her for being thoughtful enough to include everyone. But she realizes that his slow brain hasn't caught up to reality and explains that it is the perfect opportunity to smash more cakes than ever before. Just as Mahiru tries to tell him how excited she is, they see a human twig in a car beside the bus and wonder why he is trying so hard to look appealing. When Itsuki asks who the wannabe Ken is, Mena tells him that Isekai'd is actually the Academy's idol who keeps chasing after baddies way out of his league for some reason. While he struggles to get their attention, Mahiru and Fallon explain how he spent eons stalking them even after they refused to go out with him. Leary then tells them to cut him some slack because he was born with his addiction to baddies and can't do anything about the lack of self-respect he demonstrates whenever they are around. As Itsuki begins wondering how he even knew they were going to the beach, Mena realizes that it was the stupid post she made earlier on and tries to delete it so the others won't find out. Minutes later, they finally get to the beach, and the girls quickly get changed before running off to engage in several activities. As they continue trying out a bunch of different games, Mana notices Itsuki staring at their swimsuits and checks to see if he is bricked, but he kicks her into the clouds and goes to ask Leary why she isn't in the water like everyone else. After she says her fortune-telling predicted bad luck with the water for her, they see Seiya having a full-on photo shoot while dressed like a college femboy. When she blames it on his natural narcissistic behavior, he tells her to stop defending him, but she explains how she found out after he showed up at her shrine for a reading. Itsuki still struggles to believe it, and that gets her upset, but then she switches personalities to a hot-headed chick named Lilith, who then cusses him out for making her sad. As she tells him that Leary's readings have always been correct, He tells her to stop yelling because it won't make him believe in the sham she is running with her glass ball. She then realizes that he needs proof and tells him to get a reading from Larry before switching back to her. After begging him to at least try being a little open-minded, Larry reads his fortune, but the results shock her, so she quickly writes it down and tells him not to worry before claiming to actually be a scammer. Lilith then switches back to ask for his results, but after he tells her about Larry's weird reaction, she finds it stuffed in her swimsuit and takes a look before saying that he will soon join his ancestors on the other side. Upon seeing how he barely reacts to it, she starts verbally assaulting him while Mana spies on them to give Seiya some information in exchange for a watermelon. After Lilith gets tired of Itsuki and switches back, Larry tries to convince him that his life is actually in danger, but he refuses to believe and asks for proof. Just then, she reminds him of the reading she did for Seiya and shows him how she used it to give Mana instructions to keep him occupied with a nut-draining massage that leaves Seiya twitching like a newbie who just got his first taste of the GOK 5000. Upon seeing that, Itsuki apologizes for not trusting her sooner and asks if she can help him stay alive, so she activates her powers again, but the solution it offers leaves her blushing and speechless. The next moment, Itsuki ends up in the ritual room with Lilith, who then explains that the only way to save him is to make a new offspring. As she crawls closer to give him a proper view of her milkers, he completely forgets how to think rationally and proceeds to lay pipe better than he ever has before. At the foster training home the following day, Alfie forces his offspring through a grueling drill to make them stronger until he shows up to see their progress. As she hides her devilish nature to please him, Allie shows up to spy on him and pays close attention to everything they say. After Alfie serves him a cup of tea, he spots Seiya spying on Allie and summons his sword to cut him down, causing Allie's water fountain to spill as she never expected to see him. When he asks if she is okay, she acts like he got her mixed up with someone else, and runs into a smith's shop to get a special staff she asked him to make. After handing it over, he asks why she needs weapons since she is only serving as a baby maker for Itsuki, and she explains how having them makes her feel close to him. Upon getting to the church to store it in her secret weapons room, Seiya shows up and asks if he can hide out until Itsuki stops hunting him. She agrees and notices that he is stressed about something, so she offers to hear him out, and he proceeds to explain how he has constantly failed to win the heart of any chick he likes. After saying a prayer to help him feel better, she decides to tell him about her secret struggles as well, but things take a weird turn as she makes him swing her new spear until he begs for a break. As she orders him to take it seriously, he slips on his own sweat and lands on her jugs just as Itsuki walks in with Mana. Seiya immediately tries to explain, but she stops him and says it's nothing to worry about. After Mana checks to make sure she hasn't already done the deed, she decides to come clean and takes Itsuki to the weapons room. She then accepts that her tastes are a bit psychotic, but he falls in love with it and commends her on being able to secure such an amazing collection. As he grabs one of the spears to test it out, she forces Seiya to start a photo shoot and convinces Itsuki to go shirtless before making him try out every single weapon. When she finally tries to hand over the special spear she made Seiya swing, Itsuki and Mana explain that she didn't get the same symbolic version used for lovers. After she breaks down in shame as she realizes that she still doesn't know enough about weapons, Itsuki tries to cheer her up, but she becomes convinced that he doesn't like her anymore. He then explains how attracted he became after seeing her collection and asks if she wants to be his next baby mama. Once at the ritual room, he tells her to take her time to get mentally prepared and climbs into the bed to wait for her. The next moment, she decides to let loose and pulls out her whip before sinking her boot into his crack and performing the freakiest exorcism known to man. At the start of the next day, a girl named Khalid runs through the countryside, greeting folks as she prepares for another day at her grandfather's bakery. Meanwhile, Itsuki keeps stalking her with Mana while wondering why he has to be the one who pops her cherry. Mana then reminds him that the fate of the world is more important than his stupid moral code. Itsuki still struggles to accept that he has to do it to her, so Mana tells him to stop acting like a wuss and kicks him out of the tree to meet Khalid. At her grandfather's bakery, minutes later, she shows him where to place the flower and asks if he should really be spending his time with her when he could be training instead. When he says it won't be a problem, she tells him that expecting her to make offspring in exchange for his help will be a lot to handle because of how busy she is. Itsuki then immediately claims that he just wanted to assist her after seeing how dedicated she is. She still asks if he wants to clap, so he admits to it but says it will be some time in the future when her cat stretches and grows enough to handle a magnum.
I don't even know if that's PG!
Upon hearing that, she starts to feel a lot better being around him, so they continue baking together. At one point, he asks if all the kneading doesn't get her tired, but she says baking has always been her dream and claims to love how happy people get after they taste her bread. Itsuki tries to commend her, but then Mana shows up to suggest that he manhandle her undeveloped plot just like the dough, and he ends up throwing her out the window to protect Colette's innocence. Several minutes later, they finish with the new batch of bread, so she cuts out a piece and tells him to open wide. He initially gets embarrassed and says she doesn't have to feed him, but she tells him to stop making it awkward, so he accepts and realizes that she is actually good at baking. The next moment, Mana comes back and asks why he isn't eating her up as well, so he launches her back into space and wonders how she always manages to sneak up on him. Colette then asks for help setting up the bread for consumers, but after several minutes of complete silence, he tells her not to worry because her usual customers are probably just busy with work. When she says the bakery has been struggling since she took over, he asks if she knows why, so she tells him how talented her grandfather was and says it's probably because she doesn't have what it takes. As he watches her sad expression and thinks of a way to cheer her up, Mana returns and suggests clapping her sadness away, but he responds by throwing her out again. Just then, Mahiru and Ellie show up to help with any work they have left and end up buying a lot of bread before leaving. Their first sale causes Itsuki to get hyped up, but the excitement quickly wears off after minutes of waiting for another customer. The next moment, Ellie walks in with his offspring and explains how she decided to stop their training for the day so they could experience normal life for once. When they all start asking for bread, Itsuki tells them to eat as much as they want but quickly regrets it after checking his empty purse. Luckily, Ellie came prepared, so he thanks her for all the help before asking Colette for the real reason why she doesn't get any regular customers. Right then, two demon clowns walk in to threaten Colette and suggest closing down since they don't make any profit selling bread. When Itsuki asks who they are, they start boasting about the lunch pack their company is famous for and tell Colette to sell the bakery so their company can set up a new branch. Itsuki's offspring then take turns roasting them for thinking that they can just walk in and bark orders while looking like possessed clowns who got addicted to blasting gear. After a couple more minutes of getting verbally assaulted, they both take off running, so Itsuki and the others go out as well to see them off. He then asks Colette if they are the ones scaring off the customers, but she says it's actually their lunch pack company. After their small and affordable pack became an instant hit, almost every other bakery started shutting down. As Khalid starts to consider shutting down as well, Mana tells Itsuki that the company actually belongs to the family of one of his wives named Femiruna. He immediately races over to her family mansion to talk to her about everything, but she says there's nothing she can do because the lunch pack company is very important to her family. As she turns to leave, he tries to pull her back to keep talking, but she pulls away from him and slips before slamming her head against a table and losing consciousness. Hours later, she wakes up in a dark storage room and almost loses bladder control when a guy walks in with a mask to offer her some bread. After dropping it and locking her inside, Itsuki takes off the mask and asks Mana if kidnapping her was really a good idea. Immediately after she fell unconscious, Mana told him that harming one of his wives could get him sentenced to death and convinced him to abduct her so they could win her over by taking care of her. After she tells him to stick to the plan, he thanks her for the help and apologizes for always treating her like a depraved psycho. As he leaves to thank Colette for letting them keep Femiruna in the storage closet, Mana reveals her true intentions to make sure Femiruna accepts his magnum at all costs. By then, the low-budget Disney princess has just found a vent, so she opens it to escape, but after seeing nothing but open fields, she falls back and thinks they are in the middle of nowhere. Hours later, Itsuki comes in with a new batch of bread and sees that she didn't even touch the first one, so he tells her to stop acting stubborn and leaves the fresh batch. Femiruna then decides to starve herself as she thinks he probably laced the bread, but after a whole day of not eating anything, Itsuki finds her about to enter the light and takes off the mask so she can understand him. After he explains how he only wants her to get better, even if she decides to hate his guts forever, she realizes that he isn't like the gold digger she has been dealing with all her life. She then accepts but says she is too weak to feed herself, so he decides to help her out, and she becomes obsessed with how good the bread tastes. She also begins craving something else but controls herself and says she is already full. As he turns to leave, she holds him back to say goodnight and keeps staring as he leaves while Mana gets excited to see that her plan is working. After days of taking care of Femiruna and going as far as giving her a bath, Itsuki finally gains her trust and asks if she would like to become his new baby mama. She tries to say no but admits that she also wants it. So they head over to the ritual room where she promises to make the strongest offspring. Meanwhile, back at the bakery, Colette's grandfather suddenly comes in to give her special recipes along with a festival brochure and convinces her to join the school festival to make the bakery famous again. At school the following day, Mana starts working on another one of her cultured stories, and Itsuki eventually decides to risk the safety of his mind to ask what it's about. She then tells him that it's for the festival and realizes that he hasn't even heard about it, so she explains how it will be the perfect chance for him to clap all his other wives. As she continues writing, Itsuki walks over to the edge and sees a speedster running inside before getting knocked off his feet by Tarua. After apologizing for nearly facing through his skull, she hands over a letter from Colette and leaves. Moments later, he walks through campus to watch the other girls set up their booths right before Mahiru shows up with Yuzua to talk about getting a permit to set up something together as well. When he eventually goes to see Colette, she tells him about taking some bread to the festival, but says she needs his help choosing which of her grandfather's 100 recipes will taste best. She also tells him that she wants to revive the last recipe that got lost because it was her grandfather's most popular creation, so he agrees to stay as long as she needs him. While the girls continue setting up back at school, Mana finishes up a building for her latest love scheme. At the bakery moments later, things take a turn when Colette asks Itsuki what part of her he would eat first as she was a loaf of bread. Despite knowing that he is treading dangerous waters, he plays it cool and chooses her ear, so she makes a whole batch of ear bread to see if they have gotten closer to her grandfather's famous recipe. After taking a bite, he experiences a sugar rush for the first time, but says she has definitely made something tastier before, so they both agree that it is nowhere close to her grandfather's special recipe. While she finishes up a new recipe to test out, Mana tries to add the finishing touches to her horror mansion, but then Tarua runs into it at full speed. Moments later, she ends up being a fortune teller, so Tarua asks if she can figure out why her deliveries have been a lot slower than usual. When Mana says she probably mixed up some of the addresses, she says it simply isn't possible and claims her super speed is the cause. Mana then tells her to try working with fewer letters than usual, but she refuses and says that would be pointless because her boss already handles half of all the deliveries. As Tarua continues defending how committed she is to being a mailman, Mana learns that she is really passionate about it and gets hyped to help her become the best. Meanwhile, Itsuki has spent the last few minutes trying out a bunch of different recipes, but they still can't figure out how to make the special bread. Upon seeing how sad she is getting, Itsuki encourages her to keep trying, so she finds her spark again and suddenly remembers the day she saw her grandfather making the special bread. She remembers hearing him say something about merging two different items, so they spend the entire night trying out a bunch of combinations before finally cramming a sausage into her tastiest bread and creating the perfect recipe. With the recipe finally perfected, they set up a booth at the festival to sell it, but then Mahiru shows up with Yuzua to sell lunch packs right beside them. When Itsuki asks why, they tell him how there was no room anywhere else and explain how Femiruna's addiction to the pack of bread he gave her makes her unfit to run the stand. He initially feels bad about having to compete against them, but then Mahiru expresses how excited she is to see who will sell more, causing him to feel a lot less guilty about the situation. While they start selling, Tarua tries to join the festival, but Mana makes her slam into a tree before handing over a letter and asking her to deliver it. Much later, Itsuki and Colette sell out all her bread, and she finally starts to regain confidence in the bakery's success. But then Mahiru and Yuzua receive a new shipment of lunch packs because of how quickly they also sold out. Seeing all the trucks causes Colette to feel insecure again, but Itsuki quickly reminds her that amazing recipes like hers shouldn't be made in factories. After thanking him for all the support, she takes him to a secret room on campus and says she is ready to take his sausage. A little while after that, Mahiru and Yuzua sell out all the packs again, so Femiruna shows up with her goons and tells them to give out plot covers instead. Moments later, Itsuki gets back and sees Narcissist standing in line for a chance to get as many plot covers as possible for research purposes.
Yeah, boy.
Just then, Tarua calls out to him and slams into a tree to avoid running into him again. After handing over his letter, she takes off running again, so he looks through the directions Mana wrote on it before finding a building close to the festival. Once inside, he gets thrown into a training montage to become the best mailman and receives a letter for Tarua immediately after surviving it. On the way back, he sees her digging around in a mud pit and asks if she has finally lost it. But she says one of her letters got lost because of how fast she was running, so he offers to help find it. After minutes of digging through the mud with her, he says the letter was probably meaningless, but she continues to feel sad, so he suggests leaving the mud pit and apologizing to whoever sent it. Just as he turns to head out, he spots the letter stuck in a tree, and she excitedly thanks him for helping before seeing the letter he came with. After reading it, she says it has something he would probably like to hear, but also remembers that she has to finish with her deliveries, so he offers to help with that as well. Minutes later, she hands him one last letter and tells him to wait until she turns around. He then sees that it's from her and reads it before writing a response and handing it over. Upon seeing that he also likes her and wants to officially make her a member of the family, she gives him a kiss on the cheek and says she is ready for the next step. In the ritual room moments later, he rubs her head to make sure she isn't nervous before proceeding to make another star offspring. Days later, Mana launches a dating show and gathers all 12 brides so they can challenge each other to see who is more worthy of Itsuki's magnum. After taking them inside, she asks Miri and Sue why they have not created offspring with Itsuki before promising to make sure they experience the best version of the love ritual. Mahiru and the others get excited to hear what the special ritual is all about, but Mana refuses to give them all the details and says they should focus on getting another session with Itsuki. She then hands Mahiru a letter, and she reads out Itsuki's request to go on a date with Sue. Upon realizing that Sue has already abandoned ship, Mana heads out and finds her playing with her pet chicken. As she reminds her that pets are not allowed on the show, the chicken attacks, but she manages to get it under control and explains that she simply can't go anywhere without him. Minutes later, she meets up with Itsuki for their date, and he signals for all her pets to be brought by a limo before saying that he did his research and is ready to fully support her love for animals. After she subtly expresses how happy she is to see that he cares about her passion, he also signals for a special meal made just for the animals. The next moment, Mana appears on a table with fruits littered across her plot and tells them both to dig in. As they both leave her to the animals, Sue explains how her parents were the ones who taught her how to take care of all the animals, but then she gets emotional talking about it. Itsuki tells her not to worry if the subject is too sensitive, but she decides to go on and describes how they both protected her with their lives on the day an impurity slipped out of the labyrinth. While he pulls her closer to offer some comfort, the other girls indulge in a bunch of activities to keep themselves occupied. At one point, Ruka asks Mahiru for all the details of the night she climbed Itsuki's mountain, but she gets embarrassed and acts like she can barely remember it. By then, Itsuki has just finished the date with Sue, so she thanks him for spending time to connect with her. All of a sudden, he sets up a food shack to offer her the symbolic sushi rice he is meant to give any girl he feels a genuine connection with. Seiya and Alfie, who have been watching the show, both get excited, but then Alfie asks why the sushi rice is such a big deal. After explaining that only the girls who receive it can stay in the show, Seiya calls Mana to ask for her thoughts on Itsuki's decision to give one to Sue so soon. Later on, she calls the girls together again to select 6 of them to take on a challenge for a private date with Itsuki. After Miri expresses her deep desire to see what makes Itsuki so special, they all get taken to a staircase, and Mana explains that only the first to get to the top will go on the date. The next moment, they all get covered in lotion and begin struggling to hold on as they climb up the stairs. After one slip sends them all crashing down like a stack of dominoes, Miri manages to pull herself to the top and immediately goes to see Itsuki, who then suggests taking a bath to clean up. She immediately puts her RIZZ game to work by taking off her glasses and making him help her into the water. As he tries to help her get cleaned up, she leans in to make sure he can feel her jugs before locating his stick with her hand and getting him bricked. After she makes him erupt in the bath, they get a table to act like civilized lovers, but he has already made up his mind and offers her the sushi rice to make sure she stays in the show. Shortly after that, he ends up having to choose between the both of them, so Sue meets him in the ritual bed first to show off her perfect cakes in a brand new kitty suit. He immediately tells her how good she looks, but then she gets sad and says she might become too weak to stay on her own if he keeps making her obsessed. When he promises to always take care of her, she gets emotional and begs him not to go back into the labyrinth so they can be together forever. He then says the only way to really have a future is if they create a powerful star child. As they lean in for the first kiss, Mana interrupts and says he has to clap both of them to achieve the goal of creating the strongest one of his offspring. Unfortunately, Sue says she isn't bold enough to handle a three-way. After he tells Miri to wait her turn, she tells him that she actually came prepared and pulls out a special potion from her golden globes before taking off her outfit to join the party. Once inside, she unleashes the love gas, and it causes Sue to forget all about her moral code, so she gets ready for a trip to Pound Town. As the gas also begins to affect Miri, she crawls over to get to business, so Itsuki grabs them both while Mana gets her furry plot devoured by Sue's pets. At the foster home the following day, Alfie expresses how proud she is of Itsuki, but gets sad because he has finally created all 12 offspring, which means he will soon go back to his world. Just then, they hear a loud roar again, and Mana immediately calls Itsuki for a meeting at the castle. When they get there, Narcissus explains how his research revealed that there is a 13th labyrinth they didn't know about, which is probably housing the source of all impurities. After Shangri-La tells him to prepare himself for his greatest fight yet, he leaves with Mana, who then points out the fact that he likely has another wife to clap. While he starts wondering who she could be, Mana shows him pictures of the guys and says he might have to get his back blown out. Several minutes later, Itsuki gets tired of sizing up all the girls in Gravenia and enters a pizza place to see if he is actually capable of taking a magnum through his backside. As he tries to shake the thought away, Mana tells him to stop fighting and accept that it is the only way to save the world, so he throws her into the furnace to shut her up for a while. Just then, he sees Seiya, who then starts acting a lot more free than usual and quickly walks away to avoid spending a single moment with him. Shortly after that, they get to the docks, and he starts to realize why Diddy became addicted to beefy dudes. He once again tries to hide his sausage craving, but then Seiya randomly decides to go on a run and stops right in front of him to show off his perfect, glistening skin. After he leaves, Setsu decides to keep walking through town and ends up watching a group of 10 out of 10 dudes all taking off their shirts to share a bath. Just then, Seiya shows up again and gets his shirt wet, so Mana asks Itsuki if he is also getting wet in the nether regions. After attacking her, he decides to prove that he is not a zesty creep by heading to the men's public bath, but after seeing so many sausages swinging in the water, his mind starts to wander again, and Mana shows up right on time to tease him about it. She almost convinces him to cross over to the other side, but he resists and shoves her into a bucket to regain his sanity. Just then, Seiya begins using her to scrub his crack and tells Itsuki to consider the fact that their coincidental meetups might just be a sign of destiny. He then offers to wash his back as well, but Itsuki refuses and quickly runs out before finding a bench to clear his head. After catching up to him, Mana says he doesn't have to be sulking around while the fate of their world rests in the balance, but Itsuki says there's no way the 13th maiden can be a guy. When Mana asks why he is having such a hard time accepting reality, he says he has only ever loved chicks, and just can't imagine bending over backward for a dude. Mana then reveals that the 13th labyrinth was actually sealed with a forbidden door, which can only mean that he has to perform a forbidden love ritual to defeat the impurity locked inside it. He still refuses to do anything with a guy, so she suggests going even further into depravity and asks if he has any sisters or pets. He would like to clap instead. For some reason, he completely ignores the fact that Mana definitely needs to be put in solitary confinement and asks if he can just start making offspring with the girls all over again. But she says that would be pointless because it has to be from the 13th maiden. As he finally starts to accept that getting clapped might be the only way, Mana gets excited and takes him to a cafe so they can decide on which guy he gets to smash. When Itsuki asks if they are even still virgins, Mana tells him that Narcissus' obsession with books definitely means he has never gotten kitty, while Seiya has actually always been a coward who runs away whenever a chick agrees to him. As Mana tries to convince him that Seiya is the perfect choice, the self-obsessed cornball shows up to tell them about his latest photo shoot before asking Itsuki if he would like to hang out and talk. Moments later, they get to a restaurant and Seiya starts talking about how lonely he truly is to act like they share a similar struggle. Itsuki then reminds him that Mahiru is actually a really close childhood friend, but he ignores that and keeps yapping about how similar they are. When he leans in to ask Itsuki if he is ready to taste his first beef stick, Itsuki starts to feel the effects of his RIZZ and almost sucks faces with him, but he chickens out at the last moment. After he runs out, Mana tells him not to worry because he can try again with Narcissus. At the library several minutes later, Narcissus tells him about the research that helped him uncover the truth about the 13th labyrinth. He then grabs Itsuki's shoulder to express his gratitude and asks for help reading an ancient text about human nature. Upon seeing that the book is about different deity techniques, Itsuki takes off running, and Mana chases after him to roast him for being too weak to handle his responsibility. When Itsuki says he can't just change who he is for them, Mana decides to tell him that she was actually once an impurity. Back then, a magician cleansed her but died before he could achieve his dream of making impurities coexist with everyone else. Luckily, Shangri-La, who was the visitor at that time, decided to keep her alive on the condition that she would contribute to the growth of their world. As a result of that, she completely changed from being a destructive impurity to serving the nation properly. After hearing this, Itsuki pulls her in for a hug and says he is ready to accept change, so Mana positions herself, expecting to be the one who gets clapped. He then runs back to the library and tells Narcissus that he is ready to do whatever it takes. The next moment, Seiya joins them in the ritual room and asks which of them he would prefer, but he decides to go all out and suggests having a three-way. After agreeing to it, they all get transported to a beach, and Mana explains that they don't actually have to clap cheeks. While Itsuki gets shocked, Seiya and Narcissus reveal that they both always knew and explain that he just needed to get open-minded to reach a new level capable of loving the real 13th maiden. Itsuki starts to get mad as he realizes that Mana has been playing him all day long, but they all tell him to chill out and convince him to spend the rest of the day having fun on the beach. The next morning, Itsuki crosses everyone off his list of potential maidens and starts to think it might actually be Mana. She then sneaks behind him to see if it's finally her turn to get bent over, but he remembers how creepy and out of shape she is and decides to keep searching. Later on, he lets Alfie defeat him during a sparring match at the foster home to see how his mini warriors will react. They initially try to retreat and almost get spanked by Alfie, but luckily two of them who have actually been paying attention remind the others of their battle formation. After commending their teamwork, Itsuki cancels training for the day, but Alfie tells him that going easy on them will only slow their progress. He then tells her that they will need the rest because he is taking them to the Labyrinth to defeat the 12th Impurity Lord tomorrow. Later that night, she meets him at a balcony after putting the little soldiers to sleep and wishes him luck on the mission. Outside the Labyrinth the following day, he explains their battle formations again to make sure they all remember it before leading them inside to face the Impurity Lord. After they get into position, Itsuki gives the order to start an attack, but one of them trips while charging in. As the Impurity Lord tries to cut her down, Itsuki dives in to save her, but she tells him to focus on the fight and not worry about helping her. He then says they all have to make it back alive, so the others start attacking to distract the beast until Itsuki sees an opening and summons all his strength to take it down. After he offers up the last star ward, Mana gets surprised because the reaction she expected didn't happen, so they wait outside until the entire labyrinth suddenly gets engulfed by a bright light. After it blasts into the nearby woods, Itsuki realizes that their fight is far from over, so they go to see Shangri-La, who then tells Itsuki to focus on finding his 13th wife. At the time, Alfie has just met Miri at the entrance of the foster home to ask why she suddenly showed up. But when Miri mentions the 13th labyrinth, she claims to be busy and walks off. Back in her room moments later, she whips out a special book of charms to find a way to make Itsuki realize that she is his last wife. For starters, she sneaks up to tape a love ribbon to his back, but Mana sees it and throws it down before saying it's probably a cursed item. Back in her room moments later, she decides to use an eraser to test their love by being the only one who uses it, but Tarua shows up to deliver a package. After she uses a pencil to sign, Tarua tells her to get a pen and uses the eraser to clean it off, causing her charm to become useless again. She still decides to make another charm and tries to swallow a sheet of paper with his name on it before realizing that her obsession is taking a dark turn. The following day, Itsuki and Mana go out to ask if anyone has an insignia with the hope that they will find the last maiden, but every chick in town becomes fixated on Seiya's perfect face. As they continue asking if anyone has an insignia, Itsuki hears Alfie's voice but fails to see her through the crowd. When they eventually get tired of all the noise and leave to check elsewhere, she goes back to her room to cry. Just then, Mana shows up and scolds her for taking so long to reveal herself as Itsuki's last wife. She then explains how some girls described her to them after the riot for Seiya's glizzy and tries to drag her out to see Itsuki. After she shows Mana a videotape her dad gave her to show Itsuki many years ago, Mana leaves to chat with Itsuki, so she can have some time to pull herself together. She then slips in the videotape and makes him watch a romance series until he starts begging for the TV to be shut off. Mana then yells at him for not understanding that Alfie came up with the story to make him see the kind of romance she wants, and says he has to put on a show to win her heart. He reluctantly agrees and spends the rest of the day acting out a cliché mafia date. But after getting dinner at a fancy restaurant, he decides to follow his gut and makes Mana drive them back to the foster home. While Mana watches from the window to see his epic fail, Itsuki casually tells Alfie about his childhood and the accident that made him an orphan. Upon seeing that she is getting emotional, he apologizes and changes the subject to the books she likes to read. When she tries to hide one particular book, he gets curious and continues asking to see it, so she hands it over. After reading through, he realizes how much effort she has put into training his offspring to make sure he is protected in the labyrinth, and thanks her for always being so helpful. She also thanks him for always risking his life to keep their world safe, but then he goes a step further by giving her a special dress he got as a present earlier on. While Mana watches with jealousy, he twirls her around the room and falls back into the bed to get a kiss. Just then, she starts complaining of belly ache and passes out, so Mana comes in to check on her and says it's probably something she swallowed. Later on, she meets Itsuki in the ritual room with the dress he bought her and climbs in to become the last baby mama. While the lovebirds take each other to the climax point, Mana decides to completely block creeps like you from seeing all the good stuff. At the foster home the following day, all his offspring circle their latest member and try to figure out why she looks so different from the rest of them. As soon as Itsuki also notices, Alfie gets lightheaded, so they take her back to the room to check if she swallowed something else. While they both realize that his magnum might have knocked some of her organs out of place, Narcissus breaks the news to Shangri-La, so he orders for a meeting with Itsuki to tell him the truth. By then, Mana has just taken Itsuki out for a walk and shares some tips so he can learn to take care of inexperienced baddies like Alfie if he ends up getting another wife. Itsuki then takes a look at all the decorations and says they remind him of the regular world before Mana sees a bookstore, and tells him to wait so she can get copies of her favorite series. Just then, he sees a shop for idol fanatics and decides to find something Alfie might like. After getting help from the store owner to find something good, he starts heading back to the bookstore, but Narcissus stops him for the meeting with Shangri-La. By then, Mana, who has just finished shopping, sees them together but gets distracted by the snow. Once at the castle, Shangri-La tells Itsuki that the 13th Impurity Lord cannot be defeated like all the others he already took down. As Mana slowly makes her way in and thinks of all the things she wants to talk to Itsuki about, Narcissus and Shangri-La explain that he can only win by performing a powerful ritual to seal the impurity away. Itsuki then asks if he just has to get an even stronger star ward to overpower it, but they say he has to sacrifice himself as the ultimate star ward to seal it away for good. Mana hears this and decides to hide away because of how sensitive such a revelation might be to Itsuki. Moments later, she meets him on the bridge and tries to tease him as usual, but he asks to be left alone for a while. He then walks back into town to sit on a bench and pays close attention to how happy everyone is, as he comes to terms with the fact that he has to pay the ultimate price to keep them all happy. Mana breaks down in tears. After seeing a family celebrating Christmas together, he decides to focus on spending the time he has left with everyone and heads back into the market to find presents. He then spends the following days sharing presents with all the girls and makes out time to make sure they are all happy. After taking care of everyone else, he takes Maharu up to the bridge and gives her a new Itsuki doll because she has probably already lost the first one. She immediately pulls out the old one and says she will always treasure it, so he tries to take the new one back, but she holds on to it and thanks him. Upon remembering their promises to stick with each other until the end, he tells her that he will always be with her even if something happens. When she asks why he is saying that, he tells her not to worry about it and tries to distract her with a kiss, but Mana shows up to ask for her gift. The next day, he goes back to the foster home to see Alfie and prepares a bowl of soup because she is still feeling the effects of getting her back blown out. After feeding her a couple of spoons, he notices that she has updated her collection of fan art and hands over the presents he bought the other day. As they keep talking, Mana sneaks in to listen to their conversation and reaches the window just as Alfie tells Itsuki that her dad was actually a visitor just like him, which could be the reason why her daughter looks a lot different from the rest of his offspring. After she tells him how her mom got killed by an impurity, he asks if she lost her abilities because of their love ritual. She then promises that the loss of her powers has nothing to do with him and vows to do whatever it takes to make sure he survives whatever comes next. As he tries to explain what is in store, she decides to put on a musical and completely ignores his requests for a decent conversation, so he sits through the mental torture of hearing her sing before leaving. Just then, he makes up his mind to save them all and heads into the weapons room to gear up while Mana follows closely and loses control of her emotions again. The next day, she finally musters the courage to say hi to him, and he apologizes for not spending time with her before showing her the candy he got as her Christmas present. When she asks if that is really all he bought, he asks if she is actually a girl, and she responds by saying she would have busted on him if she had a meat stick. Just then, he pulls her in for a hug, so she tries to tease him as usual to make him run off. But this time, he decides to play along and activates all her love buttons before setting her down on the bed to finally make her wishes come true. For some reason, the usually depraved creep becomes too shy for the real thing. So she gently shoves her tail aside and spends the rest of the day performing acts that would have landed him in the psych ward if they were in the regular world. Hours later, he falls asleep beside her, so she gets up to watch him and starts crying as she realizes that it might be the last time they will spend quality time together. She then gives him one last kiss and joins him in Snoozeville. By sunrise the next day, she wakes up and thinks he has already left, so she runs to the door to cuss him out for not waking her until he also wakes up and says he is going to seal the final impurity lord away for good. Hours later, he gathers all of his offspring outside the labyrinth to prepare for the fight that will determine the fate of their world. Meanwhile, Shangri-La and Narcissus have just called his wives together to break the news of his decision to become the sacrifice that saves them all. After Narcissus says they have to help with the ritual to seal Itsuki away with the impurity, Mahiru and the rest of them get pissed and ask why they have only just heard of this. At the time, Itsuki has just told Alfie that he will not be sacrificing himself any longer, and Mana gets excited to fight with him until the end. As they both head inside to fight, he thinks back to how fun life has been since he and Mahiru got to Gravenia and says he would rather fight for a chance to stay with them than give up his life so easily. He then asks Mana why she is going in to fight with him, so she explains how their little love session the other day made her realize that they are soulmates. Moments later, he sees the impurity and pulls out his sword before charging in for a powerful attack. After it fully reveals itself and blasts him away, he decides to take a breather to make sure his solo mission is actually a good idea. Back outside, the little soldiers start to get worried and consider going inside, but Alfie reminds them of Itsuki's orders to stay back and becomes intoxicated by the idea of being the most important wife, as they all remind her that Itsuki is a no-good creep that went as far as clapping Mana for hours on end. Alfie regains her senses and promises to deep-fry the depraved fox when they get back. Meanwhile, Shangri-La and Narcissus continue explaining to Mahiru that completing the ritual to help Itsuki's sacrifice is the only way she can go back home. After the others also convince her, she joins them to start the ritual while Itsuki keeps looking for ways to defeat the Impurity Lord. Just then, a magic circle appears under him and holds him in place as the girls continue chanting the ritual spell. Before saying the last words to turn him into a sacrifice, Mahiru stops and says she can't let him die, as the Impurity Lord suddenly lets off sonic blasts to murk him in case they try to perform the ritual again. Mahiru tells Shangri-La that there has to be another way to save Gravenia without risking Itsuki's life. Miri then suddenly remembers reading an ancient text that said they could completely neutralize all impurities if Itsuki manages to truly bond with all of them. After Mahiru says they have to give that a shot instead of sacrificing him, Shangri-La and Narcissus agree but hope they will actually succeed. Just then, Alfie and the others sense a powerful energy getting close to the door right before the impurity bursts out to destroy Gravenia. As they all get ready to fight it off, Mahiru shows up with the girls, and they all promise to give it their all before saying a prayer to activate their powers. As they all synchronize with his offspring to form 3 overpowered mech suits, Itsuki gets back up and fears that Mana took too much damage from the rubble. After telling him to make sure he fights to the end for the life he has built, she accidentally pulls out the bottle of laced honey packs she wanted him to take for their first night together. She then apologizes for the mix-up and hands him a special bottle she got from Shangri-La to make sure he has all he needs to win the fight. Just as his little soldiers realize that their plasma blasts are useless, the impurity tries to murk all the girls, but Itsuki shows up just in time to save them. Mahiru immediately asks how he could make up his mind to die without telling her, and they all agree, so he apologizes and asks for their help to win. After forgiving him, they all combine their powers to fight off the impurity, but after it shoots out a barrage of powerful dark matter beams,
I'm so glad I was able to protect you.
he then begs Mana for the potion she gave him earlier, but she says there was only one bottle. So Alfie tells him not to worry and claims to be extremely happy with how things turned out. When he refuses to accept it, she asks for one last kiss to prove their love, so he leans in for the kiss and watches as she becomes pixie dust. Just as he becomes determined to destroy the Impurity Lord at all costs, Alfie's insignia appears above him, so all the girls activate their powers again to join hers. With all their powers finally charged up to the max, Itsuki merges with his offspring to create an even stronger mech suit before letting off an insanely powerful blast that forces the impurity to reveal its true form. It then tells Itsuki to accept the darkness because it is their impure act of defiling each other that became the fuel for its existence. Itsuki responds by blasting again, so the impurity zaps him with lightning before grabbing him with tentacles to deal more damage. After it offers him a partnership to destroy the world together, Itsuki refuses and says there are too many beautiful things and people he hasn't experienced yet. As he also talks about everything he has learned from Alfie and the others, Rosaru decides to channel her power as well and transforms into a trident before freeing him. Just then, all his offspring start another sacrifice ritual, but this time they leave Itsuki out of it and thank him for letting them experience life before combining their abilities to destroy the impurity forever. The next day, Shangri-La holds a ceremony with the girls to thank Itsuki for his help, and after hours of thinking, Maharu tells him that she has decided to go back to the regular world so she can see her parents again. She then says he doesn't have to go back with her, but he decides to leave as well. So they head to the portal and apologize to the girls for choosing Gen Z life over their magical world. After they all take turns saying goodbye and giving them presents, they both thank everyone for the time they spent together and turn to leave. Just then, the girls change their minds and run up to join them, so they all jump in. But after getting back to the rooftop at school, Itsuki sees that Alfie and all his little soldiers also made the trip back. After learning that the chick in a costume is Mena, Maharu hears what he did to her and almost strangles him to death. She then accepts that they all have to start living together and suggests turning her house into the harem mansion. After they spend the next couple of days settling into regular life, Itsuki comes up with the bright idea of getting married to all of them. Will Itsuki find a way to balance his responsibilities as a baby daddy while adjusting back to normal life, or is he about to learn that one sausage is not enough for 12 freaky baddies? That is it for this video. If you liked it and want the second part, drop a comment and subscribe to the channel for similar content. And as always, thanks for watching.